Hey, German, Ger, Germana,
Yeah,
Germana,
Germana.
Germana, I'll say your last name is
It's Rovinelli.
Rovinelli.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. This is my new friend,
Aw.
Germana Rovinelli. We just met, and we were introduced by a friend in common, and in the recovery world, we have already I can see that we have some similar stories. We came from alcoholic homes, and where the number one rule is you don't talk about what happens in the house, and the family secrets, and Germana has written a book about that journey, right? And the road to recovery. Uh, it's funny that we say in the 12-step world, you're only as sick as your secrets.
Yeah.
All right. And so what brought you to this? I mean, many of us think, oh gosh, I remember as a kid thinking, when I go to jail, I'm going to write a book, and, 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 and here it is, 40 years later, I still haven't written that thing, but you've done it. Good for you.
What brought me to have someone really pick at me and say, Germana, you need to write your story, was my divorce lawyer. When I went in for my divorce, he asked me to write my life story as I knew it, and then how I met my husband, and then why I was getting a divorce. And he's a bit of a vulture. He's a bit of a mean guy. Everyone wants him for the lawyer. And he said to me, Germana, I have so much respect for you. I had no idea that you'd been through all of these things. You need to write a story. And I looked at him. I said, I just want a divorce, okay? But I took the information and I put it in my computer, and it had sat in my computer for at least 17 years.
Wow.
And I would have different people. I would share nuggets, and I would say, I was trained by this person. I did this, blah, da, da, da. And they go, you need to write a story. And they just kept saying it. And I'm not a writer. I'm not. And I went through the process of looking for somebody to help me. And I asked one person who had written a book in our area who had been quite successful. And she said, well, would you like to speak to the company that I did? And so they Zoom meeting me. And and the woman was like a great saleswoman, and she was pitching. And she goes, and it's only $999 US a month with an expectation of 12 to 16 months. And I thought, you guys are crazy. I can't afford that kind of money. I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm not a bored housewife spending my husband's money. And so then I did a bit more digging, and I was lucky enough to know a woman in my area who is a professional journalist and a writer. And I asked her, I said, would you please do this? Because there's no way I could do it by myself. It was just too much content, and I would get lost in the muck of it. And we made an agreement, and she knows that I'm, self-employed as a woman in my town, as a healer, as a helper, as someone who helps people reach their goals. And so she would come to my house once a week. She would interview me like a journalist would. She'd answer the questions, and she'd audio tape that section. And then she'd go home and write the chapter, and then she'd send it to me and say, now proofread it. But she could be objective, and I knew that she was strong enough to handle what was coming out of my mouth. And she wouldn't shame me or, screw me sideways with negative comments about
things. Yeah.
She's
no judgment.
No judgment, just holding space for another woman telling her scary story. And there was a few times we just both cried and hugged, and she'd go home. And so she helped me, and she gave me a really safe place to reveal myself, and also not make it seem dirty or bad, but just here it is. And then she said, Germana, you have to self-publish, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what does that mean? And I just thought that meant that I would get an ISBN code, and I didn't know where to get the ISBN code. And so I spoke to someone else who, actually, I think it was the people that want to charge $999 a month to do the actual, the publishing of it.
Yes.
And I was like, that's insane. That's a traumatic bell. And previously I'd spoken to a woman who was going to help me write the book, who wanted to charge me $30,000 to do it. And again, I'm like, you guys are out of your mind. So the universe kind of, this is interesting. I always say it's a coincidence is when God's too busy to stand up and take a bow. Because in my Facebook feed, there was this thing about, do you want to write a book? And they had contacted me and I had kind of ghosted them. And then after I'd had this conversation with this woman who wanted a ridiculous amount of money, and it was in US funds and I'm not supporting local, I call the guy back and I say, I'm willing to have a conversation with you. I need help with my book because I don't know what to do. I'm out of my pay grade. I don't know what to do. Yep. So we have a conversation and he goes, we have a special on right now. It's $2,699. And we do all of that instead of the $999 a month US for 12 months. It was like $2,699. And I said, take my credit card while I'm in a yes mindset, just take it. And then I sent him the manuscript and we got rolling. But what was really neat, David, is 2 days later, I might cry. These people are all on Vancouver Island, which is where I live. So we want to keep our money local. But 2 to 3 days later, I got an email from the president of C.P.T.S.D saying, congratulations. I'm so happy that we're doing your book. I used to be your client as a personal trainer. And she sent me pictures of the workout cards I'd made for her 13 years later. And I just sat here and wept. I thought that, again, the universe is supporting me in doing this and I'm not being financially traumatized, because a lot of people get out into that world and they get abused. Yes. They get abused financially. And then, now you're really screwed because you've got to sell this book.
Yes.
I didn't do this to make money. Not at all. It was for me to help people make the link between the unresolved issues, the unresolved trauma, how someone that comes from addiction or codependency or post-traumatic stress disorder can start to uncode their history and start to find healing journey after the fact. Because most of us, we come from something that's problematic and we use whatever we use because we didn't have the tools to deal with our feelings. So we just keep tampering them down. And we actually never show up as our true self because we've been taught that our true self isn't enough. And so for me, I just thought I got nothing to lose other than whoever is in my family that decides to, stick me in a closet. Doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't really have a family. I've been an orphan emotionally and psychologically my whole life.
Yes. Boy, can I relate, really. And thank you for the details of that, because, a lot of us, many people are maybe thinking about writing a book or thinking that their story would be worthy of telling and stop really early in the process because it just seems so daunting. And the magic is that once we say yes, right, the universe falls in line. God says, okay, thank you, let's do this. But God or the universe or love or whatever we want to call it can't help if we're not in the yes. And so your yes triggered, right?
Oh, flow. Yeah. And it was, I felt very, very privileged because, again, the lady that helped me, she's helping some of my other friends now, but she's a retired journalist. She's done books, she's done movies, she's done the whole thing. And she's like an old European lady. So, they typically have a pretty good tolerance for, uncomfortable things. And I felt, because in the first place, I was looking at this and I knew that I could just be put into this grinding machine, where I'm going to be financially traumatized again. And most of us come from trauma and then we stop functioning. And then it's, this over-functioning behavior, this post-traumatic stress behavior shows up. She charged me very little money. And she just said, if the book does well, you can give me a little bit of a royalty off the back end. And I'm like, I would do that. But otherwise I would have walked out the gate with $60,000 of debt.
No.
And I mean, oh my God, most people, like, if people purchase it from C.P.T.S.D, I think I get $10 and I'm giving 20% to the Last Door Recovery Society because they saved my son. I have a son because of that place. And
yes. Yeah.
And so they've given me something that's so precious to me. If it goes through C.P.T.S.D, there's more money that comes. If it goes through Amazon or Chapters, I get $1.40. One's a
Wow.
giant machine. And the lady that I asked in my town about, where to go, and she said, well, she introduced me to her publishing house. After I had the conversation about the $999 a month for 12 to 16 months, I said, excuse me, I know this is none of my business. Did you make any money or did you break even on your book? And she ghosted me. So I knew that she was probably in debt about $25,000 at least for using that publishing house.
Yes. Yeah. So,
Horrible.
Your journey of recovery, how old were you when you first came into the 12 steps?
I think it was about 23.
Yeah. And did it take in the beginning? Were you serious?
I was terrified. I'd married a man who almost beat me to death.
Yes.
He was identical to my father.
And we do that, don't we?
Yeah, married my husband. My husband was
married my mother twice.
Yeah, I bet. I believe you. And what I remember is as he was punching me in the face and I'm watching my blood splatter on my girlfriend's walls, and I'm thinking this guy's going to kill me. The way he's speaking to me, the way he's screaming is like, that's my dad. And he was planning to decapitate me. And he drove me to my house and, to our house, and was throwing a knife at my head and making me say all these horrible things. I'm a whore, I'm a this, I'm a that. And I'm like, yeah, you bet. I'm a slut. I'm a this, I'm a that, whatever. And eventually he got exhausted from beating me and he fell asleep and I escaped. And then I went away. I went to be near my mother, who then, when he came back, protected me and said, you're not getting near her, which was the one time she stood up for me. I was shocked. And then I knew that if I didn't call the cops, he would hunt me down and he would murder me. I just knew it. I was like, this guy is evil. And he was very angry. And he was like a Charles Manson. This door would flip and you're like, his eyes change. And I'm like, that's not the same guy. This guy's like a possessed man. And so I charged him with assault, bodily harm, blah, blah. He went to jail for 2 years, but they had to x-ray my teeth because I didn't know if I was going to lose them. And I knew then that I made really bad choices. And alcohol and drugs would make me pick a better looking abuser. And so anytime I ever thought of using, I just pictured the blood splattering. And I'm like, that's you making choices on drugs and alcohol.
Step one.
Holy shit. and so, yeah, I mean, I was so scared. I had no idea. I think I cried for the first 6 months. I just stuck my head on the table and cried like a child.
What town were you living in? Where did you sober up?
Originally it was in Souk, BC. That was where I was introduced to the work. I was a cook at Mum's Cafe. And I liked it.
Small town recovery.
Yeah. And I was introduced to Narcotics Anonymous through one of my girlfriends who she had gotten clean. She had over a year clean, and she was into the downer drug, and I didn't believe that people could actually get clean off that, but she had a year clean, and we were both German, so we both had really weird, disrespecting families. And she was the one that introduced me to Narcotics Anonymous, and she was the one that told me, you have to get away from your husband because he will murder you. And I went, oh yeah, whatever. And then he tried, and I was like, wow, I better get my head screwed on straight. And I immediately moved to Victoria, and I lived in a house where you rented a room for $350 a month by the Craigdarroch Castle. And I went to meetings where they actually had an Al-Anon place, like an Al-Anon club. What's it called? Al-Anon Club. My God.
Al-Anon, yeah.
So long. And I went to meetings every day, and I stayed there for a long time. And I burned my life down in many ways because I had no life skills. I was seeing a doctor that worked in recovery, and I was a fucking mess. I didn't know that there was a place that people could recover. I honestly believed that I was a third-class person and that I would die. And I was hoping that I would die soon and it wouldn't be too painful.
That's a deal, right?
Yeah.
Take me quick, please.
Yeah, like make it. Yeah, so no blood, please. And I just didn't know there was a place for people like me. And when I saw it and started to notice and try to learn, and I was like this person just staring and listening and going, oh my God. And I had so much shame around God and any of that. I couldn't do a solid step 3 until I think I had a year and a half of recovery, because I was convinced that the minute I turned it over, that a laser beam would just take me down and poof, and I would just turn into, like, shrapnel would fly off me, because I had been so shamed as a child.
Yes.
I was taught that I was a worthless piece of shit. And my behaviors mimicked that. And I knew I was in so much trouble. Mm-hmm. I had an eating disorder. I had all sorts of issues. I had been sexually abused. I had no idea that I'd been sexually abused, but I was reenacting some of that. I had no boundaries.
Yeah.
Men were coming after me, and I'm like, what do I do? And, it was horrible. It's amazing that I really lived. It's amazing. And some people held space and some people gave me a little place where I could learn to have a little bit of dignity and a little bit of respect, and believe that my life wasn't really destroyed, but I didn't even know how to live. I often say I came in as a feral cat with those qualities. Mm-hmm. And no life skills. I could operate and play a situation, like if I need to work, if I need to do this, I knew how to operate, but I had no inner life. I had no relationship with myself.
Yes.
It was all a defense mechanism against looking for the next assault, looking for the next thing that was going to cause me damage. And then, I would medicate with food. I had no skills, and it's amazing that I'm alive.
I can certainly relate. Very similar. I sobered up at 25 and had no skills. I'd been in the drug business for X amount of years, and I didn't go to high school, let alone university or any of those things. And my bookshelf looks much like yours. I've been a student ever since. And I didn't realize that. But books saved my life, and I began to I was trying to find a way out, and even though the steps were there in front of me, it took quite a few years. I stayed sober. I didn't drink, but it took quite a few years for me to actually be able to do the work. And and a lot of pain, and a lot of in recovery, lots of. My lowest emotional, spiritual, moment was 2 years in recovery. And when, I was like, oh, and I've had quite a few of those,
Yeah,
and you can relate but that's amazing, that you're a great example to come in at 23. And so you got to a place where you got a relationship in recovery and found another guy and did whatever you did.
I burned it down really well. Like at 6 months, I was being groomed by a man who was much older than me, because that's what I went after, because I have daddy issues. So I went after men that were older, and I thought, well, they'll love me, they'll take care of me, they'll make up for what my dad never gave me, because my dad didn't ever acknowledge that I had any worth or value. So I could never see myself being with someone close to my own age, because I would think, I don't have enough of what it takes. I'm not enough, I'm not smart enough, blah, 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 blah.
That's interesting for you to share that, because a lot of, women in that place, right now wouldn't have the language to share that, that's what's happening.
It's brutal. So I ended up getting groomed by this man, and unfortunate. All I'm gonna say, the only good thing that happened is we were intimate once. He told me that he couldn't use a condom because he couldn't keep it up, and that he was sterile. I had sex with the man once. It wasn't good sex. I was pregnant. I was pregnant 3 weeks later, and he bought me a diamond ring. He wanted to marry me. He bought me a Sportster. He was like doing all of that love bombing stuff. And I looked to him, I said, listen, you lied to me. You told me you were sterile. Clearly you're not, because I'm pregnant. And I said, I have a funny feeling if I went anywhere with you, he wanted me to go with him to Detroit because he was from the States. I said, they'll find me cut up in a freezer somewhere in park. And I said, get away from me. You're a effing lying bag of you know what. And I just Then I packed my things, filled my car up. I was 6 months clean. I mean, this is horrible. And I thought, this is God's will. I didn't have the courage to have an abortion. I couldn't live with myself. And I thought, this is God's will. I packed up my car with my jewelry. I still think I had my little dog. I had this beautiful little dog that I love named Boo Boo. And I moved up to Nanaimo because Nanaimo has really solid recovery. And that man stopped me. And I came up here because I wanted, and he threatened me. He says, if you don't marry me, I will prove you unfit mother and I will take your child away. And I was like, holy crap. And so I knew that if I didn't make my recovery my number one thing,
Yes.
I didn't have any. And I was terrified of having a child and not having the skills to take care of that child.
Yeah.
So I came up here because our recovery community at that time was one of the best in BC. And so I head out up here.
I've heard that.
Yeah. I head out up here. I got back into teaching fitness classes because when I was in my addiction, I was also teaching fitness classes. I had a black belt in martial arts. I had trained in kickboxing, Thai boxing. I was trained by Bruce Lee's second cousin. I knew how to protect myself if I wanted to. But here I was, this little woman, this little girl with no skills, complete complicated post-traumatic stress disorder all over the place. I'm gonna have a baby. And I was like, what do I do? Like, stay in a meeting. And I went to a place called Adapt. Back here, we had a place back in those days called Adapt, and I had a therapist named Germana Rovinelli. I think she's still alive. I'm trying to hunt her down because I want her to know about the book.
What was her name again?
Germana Rovinelli.
Okay. Hey, Rini.
Yeah.
Somebody will tell her.
I hope so. And she lives in Nanaimo. And I used to sit at this place called Adapt, and they have a library there, and they had all these videos of John Bradshaw.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'd watch these videos and I went, oh my God, my family's crazy. Oh my God, I'm crazy. Oh my God. And I just sat there and wept and cried and cried and cried because I went, I'm not bad. I'm not bad. I came from a crazy family, and I begged her. I said, please help me to get me into treatment before my baby's born, because if I get into treatment after, it'll be too late. I'm scared of hurting my baby. I'm scared of not knowing how to love my baby.
Yes.
And she fought for me. And she got me into a treatment center at about 7.5 months pregnant. And
wow.
There was a place here in Nanaimo, and it was just for chemically dependent women. And it was a place called Maya House. And the sister of it is called Aurora House in Vancouver. And so that's the same style of treatment. And this one was funded by the government, and eventually the funding fell through. But I was there for, I believe it was 6 weeks, and it was like doing 3 years of therapy in 6 weeks.
Yes.
It saved me.
Was it 12-step based though?
That was a big part of it, but we didn't do a lot of 12-step work in group.
Yes.
We needed to do our history. We needed to do clarity on our family of origin work.
So a lot of first step work, really.
Yeah. And I know that in one of the groups, because I had been sexually abused and my mother had allowed it. My mother had allowed me to be sexually abused at 11 for quite a few years until I actually ran away. She caught the man who was 18 sexually assaulting me at 11. And she took out my horsewhip and whipped me viciously in front of him. And the blood's running down my back, and I'm trying not to cry because we weren't allowed to cry as children. And what that told him is that I was always available. No one would protect me. And so they made us write out our sexual history from that time all the way backwards. And as I got to that, the woman said to me, you were raped. And I went, oh, no, I'm a slut. I'm a slut. No, I'm a slut. You don't understand. She goes, listen, even if you were 16 and you were laying on the floor screaming, come F me, come fuck me, and someone touched you, it's rape. She goes, you were raped and it wasn't your fault. And I couldn't get my head wrapped around it. I was like, no. I was still protecting my mother, because then I'd have to face the truth that she allowed this to happen. She allowed me to be fed to these sharks, right? And in the group, they circled me and I had to share this. And all of the women looked at me and said, you were raped and it wasn't your fault. And I ended up with this like energetic feeling coming from the bottom all the way up. And I fainted. I fainted on the spot because I couldn't comprehend that it wasn't my fault.
Yes.
I wasn't a whore, that I wasn't bad. And that from that point on, I was always being targeted by predators because they could smell it in the water like a shark. There's one, there's one. She has no boundaries. I'm going to go over there. And it's her fault that I got a steamer, that I'm interested. I'm a man, right? I was set up to fail from the very beginning. And so that place taught me to have dignity and rights and to speak back. And I had to have this poster over my bed, a big poster that says, I was raped and it wasn't my fault. Every day it was there. And then I reported it to, back then it was called Workers' Compensation Board or something. And they had like a tribunal thing. And it was supposed to go to court. And 2 days before court, they decided that it wasn't worth government spending to do this. They phoned the person who was the individual who admitted it, that he did that, but he thought I liked it, right? So he felt better. So they said that they weren't going to go to trial, that they were going to collapse it. My mother wouldn't speak to me for months. And I said, just because you didn't have a voice and didn't speak up for me, now I'm going to be the parent I never had. I am going to give that little girl a voice. She didn't deserve that. She was beautiful and precious. And so much was taken from me because of that behavior being allowed for years. And then one day I got a check from them. I think they sent me $5,000 to go get help. And I cried. David, I cried and cried and cried and cried because I'd been validated in a way I'd never been validated. Everyone always said, oh, you're crazy. You're making it up. You're crazy. You know, it's your fault. What were you wearing? And I'm like, are you kidding me? You know? And I cried. I just cried and cried.
I took a fifth step last night from, I get to do that sometimes. And I did a fifth step with a fellow last night and this came up.
I bet.
And, and we talked about the culture that many of us were brought up in. This is not in any way to excuse any behaviors. No. Just to say that, many men are running around, this man in particular last night, with a lot of shame.
Yes.
Over some of, some similar behaviors. And it's, I think that, because we don't have a sound and sane ideal in that area, unless we do actually do the work and create a sound and sane ideal, we've just adopted the one that we got in our culture. And in my family, women were not respected.
Yeah.
And period. And my mother was not respected, and I didn't learn to respect women from my father. So I lived on the other side of that, and it was I feel emotional just sharing, and hearing your story.
It's a tragic loss, because if we're not taught how to nourish and esteem and care for one another, we do live more like feral animals.
Yeah. I think it's affected every relationship. Well, it has every relationship, and even in recovery, it took a long time for me to realize that I'd always been there trying to get something. You know what I mean? Of course,
yes, 100%. Yeah. Well, and it comes from a wound. It comes from not knowing how to ask for what a person wants. Like, I'm working on my step 4 right now in the ACA program.
Yeah.
And what I know is that if I do not have that connection and say, you're allowed just to be who you are, you don't have to put on this mask. You're allowed to have a vision. You're allowed to feel safe. If I can't do that, I go into, we call them survival traits. And in the other programs, we call them defects of character. But in reality, they've kept me alive. So it's pretty hard for me to go, oh yeah, sure, yeah, I'm just this and that. They've kept me safe. And I forget the question that you'd asked. For me, I have reenacted my unresolved childhood and family origin issues in every relationship. I've picked men that abuse, neglect, abandon me, that are sociopaths, psychopaths.
So even years in recovery, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, and it's in the book. That's the thing. And it's maniacal because I will actually only fall in love with, and my therapist said this week, forgive me for cutting you off. I hired this guy that was really expensive, and he works just in recovery and relationships and blah, blah, blah. And I did it through Zoom, and I got a settlement. So I had a chunk of money. I'm like, here, take the money. He does my family of origin work. He goes through the whole thing and he looks at me, he goes, Germana? And I'm like, what? I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never heard of a story with so much intensity and so much trauma in my entire life. He says, the butcher hung himself. He goes, look at me, you must write a book. And I'm like, what? And then he goes, and you're going to fall in love with a psychopath because that's what raised you. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I just paid you $1,000 to tell me that? Shit. 3 years later, I show up with a psychopath for a boyfriend.
So can I want to ask you about something.
Sure.
My experience is that I denied the trauma.
Well, of course. Then you'd have
even years in recovery, I said, no, that wasn't that way. For a lot of years, I could hardly remember anything before like 8 or 9 years old. And I just denied it. I minimized it. I said it wasn't, and not even consciously. I just, whatever, it wasn't that big a deal. And it's only, I mean, here I am, 40 years in the work, and it's only in the last few years that I've really been looking into that. And reading Gabor's work and doing this other amazing neuroscientist that I've been spending some time, Andrew Huberman, who's exposing, helping me to see more. So I think that your book can be really helpful to a lot of people to even open the door,
connect the dots.
Yeah, to open the door and say, okay, this did happen, or maybe things happened we didn't realize how traumatic they were, or what does trauma mean? We think often that trauma means that, we were involved in a train accident.
No.
Well, I was for about 8 years. It was a big train accident. And so I hear you, and I look forward to reading your book. I haven't, because we just met, I haven't had a chance to. I really look forward to getting a copy in.
One of the things that I think privileged me to decode the family secrets is that when I was in my still active addiction life, and I was in kickboxing and being trained by Han Lee, and he took us all once to a Ravine show, right? The hypnotist dude.
Yes,
and
yeah.
We're all watching, and two of his key top students became part of the show. And in that time, I'm watching, I'm like, this is real. This is real what's actually happening. He's got them in hypnosis, and he takes them so many years earlier or later, and he asks them all what they're doing. And this one woman goes, I'm embezzling money out of the business. And I'm like, holy shit. So they're all doing their thing. And the two students from my teacher, Han Lee, were teaching forms, gung fu. There's like 360 moves per form, per blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking, and out of the corner of my eye, my subconscious opens up and shows me teaching a warm-up to this class to teach fitness, which told me I needed to leave the school. I was not supposed to stay there. I saw myself clearly teaching this really fun routine that I really liked. And I went, oh, I'm not supposed to stay here. I'm supposed to leave. And I knew then to leave the school. Years later, when I got into recovery, one of the ladies that worked at the gym that I worked at, really unusual human being, but she was taking training to become a clinical hypnotherapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I'll give you a free session. I'm like, whatever. So she puts me into such a deep trance, and she uses what they call as a rapid shock induction, where you hit yourself in the head with your arm, which means not necessary. It's if you've been traumatized through being hit, it's a bad idea. And so she puts me into a super deep trance. And all I can say to you, David, is I went, oh my God, this is better than drugs. Like I felt like I dropped into the womb. And she's going, you'll come to me 3 times a week for the next 3 weeks. And I thought, listen, you little piece of, you know what? You're abusing me. I don't have the money. I was just getting off of welfare. I was trying to get off welfare teaching fitness classes. But I remembered how amazing I felt. And I said, there's something here. And I already knew through Louise Hay You can heal your life. That the unfinished business is locked in the subconscious. I just thought, how do you get to it? Through hypnosis. And then I started taking training, and I became a certified clinical hypnotherapist through the Canadian Hypnosis Association. It took 8 years of mentoring and training. It wasn't a couple of weekends. I actually had doctors helping me. And as I was doing that, I was having the privilege of people helping me do some regression work. And information came. Not all of it, parts came. Like nice. when my son was a little boy and he was still sitting in his high chair. And this shocked me. I was trying to feed him in the high chair. And I would start to shake, my hands and legs would start shaking like this. I would start hyperventilating and I couldn't feed him. I would start shaking and I'd say, put the food on the tray and I'd run out of the room. I was actually having this wicked abreaction. And I said to my mother one day, I don't understand why I can't feed Conrad. She burst into tears. I said, why are you crying? And she said, your father almost killed you while you were in the high chair because you were crying. He suffocated you and you turned blue and your eyes rolled up in the back of your head and they had to break a lamp over his head. So he would drop you. My mother was a nurse and she threw water on me to make me come back. It happened twice in my childhood, pre-verbal. So that's trauma, but I don't have the ability to articulate it. All I know is I never felt safe around food. I had a weird behavior around food. I wouldn't eat in front of people. I would eat super fast. I'd get away from them. I didn't feel safe. And I didn't feel safe around men. I would get into this weird behavior, which is why co-ed treatment centers were never a good idea for me. Because I look at you and go, well, how do I protect myself, right? And so I had the privilege of doing some deprogramming work through hypnosis, and I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist, to understand parts of my behavior. Because I go, how did I get to feel like I was so worthless? How did I get to devalue myself? Like, where did that come from? A baby is born precious, innocent, and a vehicle of love, right? We're born in the image of love.
Yes, of course, yep.
And I was taught all these things and I wanted to understand how to fix it. And I was lucky that I had some really good teachers. I had some really good mentors that taught me how to deprogram myself through some meditations that I would do daily. My one teacher said to me, if you really want to help people, and I was like, I'll do anything. I'll eat a bucket of corks. What do I got to do? It's part of step 11. He goes, you must do your own inner work every day. And he would give me meditation. He would give me some yoga work. He would give me ways to slowly peel my own onion because I couldn't afford to see a therapist all the time.
Yeah. 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
10, 11, and 12.
But that was where I was able to get some of the data, the broken pieces of the puzzle, and begin to put it together.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I mean, it's interesting that, you know, after all these years, that how stuff is still, it's like the onion. It really is how stuff is still unfolding, and still, I'm so grateful to, you know, not even imagine for a second that it's over. You know, it's you know, and I'm full of thank you. I mean, my prayers are thank you prayers. They really are. You know, thank you, and to God, to the universe, that we're still in the game of opening.
The privilege.
Of opening, and you know, and it's, you know, good for you. And so you're still seeing people like as a therapist?
Yeah.
And you do personal training as well still?
My bread and butter is personal training and nutrition. I'm a clinical sort of, I can't say it, nutritional therapist with the Nutritional Therapy Association. The reason I picked them is because they're not paid for by corporations. Most of our education bodies are bought out by giant corporations. So what we're taught isn't actually true health and nutrition. It's, you know, they're like, and we want you to teach the food pyramid, and we're feeding these giant conglomerates, and we're not actually teaching real health. So I was inspired to take that course, that training. I took it in the States. And I've been in the fitness industry as a paid professional since I was 18. I'm 54. And the hypnotherapy stuff I started when my son was 2, and he's 29 this year.
Nice.
So doing that for a long time. And you never keep people when you do that work, because if you help them clear, they're good. They don't need you unless you like, and you will have a problem in about 3 months and you'll have this burning desire to call me. Yeah, no, you don't do that. You teach them so they don't need you, right?
Yeah.
And so there was a time I saw a lot more people doing hypnosis. I do some, and some lots of people just come talk. You know, they'll come and talk, and then you know the nugget of their secret will come up in their vocabulary. They'll go, "I've never felt that anyone could ever love me." I'm like, boom, there's a post-hypnotic suggestion. Would you like to take that out of your ecosystem? I can do that with you. And then boom, and then like, wow, and it'll be a story.
I say that listening is loving.
I love that.
Listening is loving.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
I stopped fixing quite a while ago. Just listen.
I love that. I've not heard that.
Yeah, thank you. Good work, girl. That's awesome. What you're doing and who you've become, and you know, I look forward to reading your book. You mentioned to me yesterday, we talked for a few minutes, and I just wanted to ask you about The Last Door. Yeah. You also mentioned that, you know, part of your book proceeds go to The Last Door, and your, I don't really know much about it. I'm actually, I work part-time in a treatment center in Calgary called Fresh Start.
Never heard of it.
And it's an amazing treatment center. Look it up. But I hear that The Last Door is really having some great success.
All I know is the pieces that I've watched. I've watched men go in there very broken, turn this off. And just like, again, the feral cat, the male version of the feral cat. And they don't have like, and you're out in 6 weeks. If you need to stay for 6 months, if you need to stay for 9 months, if you need to stay for a year, you stay. And that's
the same at Fresh Start. Our guys stay for, you know, it's all male. And the guys, you know, nobody leaves to homelessness. No, we have 2 apartment buildings as well, so so they can go to the apartments which are within about 4 blocks of the center, but lots of guys stay, you know, and often guys are coming out. Sometimes they come out of you know, their parole. They come from jail, yeah, and so they stay to finish their parole, but they're it's amazing. What, you know, but so this place, The Last Door, I'm interested in.
It's a New Westminster. They have a women's division called the Westminster House. So their women's division, it's a separate, and they also have a youth store for teenagers, because there's a lot of people that are on the street that are teenagers that are homeless, that are they're addicts because they're trying to numb the pain of being alive. No one's giving a shit about them. They might come from some really sick families, and they need a place to try. And like my sponsor, her name is Val Kilgore. A lot of people may know her. She's been married to a man that I really love named Mikey Kilgore, and he was this big, gentle giant guy. And he came from The Last Door, and I used to look at the way they loved each other, and I'm like, man, I want that. How the hell did you get that? And he came out of jail to The Last Door, did his thing, came out the other end and learned how to be, you know, a decent man. And that to me,
human being.
A really lovely man. One thing that he missed, and this is part of why I want my book to be also understood at a different level, he was not good at self-care. He did not eat well. He overworked. He treated his body like a garbage can. He died of cancer.
Yes.
I've seen that from so many people with like 20, 30 years, dead. And it's lifestyle related. Once we get clean and sober, what we do with that is our gift back to our higher power. So how do you give back if you're, you know, you're flailing because your body parts are rotting because you don't care or don't know how to look after yourself? Yeah,
I'm struggling a bit with that. With the food thing, I've just finished a book called The Longevity Paradox, and by a, you know, a doctor that, and it's all about diet, and you know, so I'm doing my very best to quit. I'm sugar is, you know, such the killer, you know. So I'm one of those guys, you know, that's, I'm in my 60s, and you know, there's no reason why I couldn't be rolling, you know, into my 80s and 90s and be productive and be, you know, giving back. So I am one of those guys, and a lot of guys, I know a lot of fellas that came in and recovered in the 70s and the 80s, and they're, they're gone, or they're nearly gone, you know.
It's again, it's that form of self-abandonment, which is part of addiction and self-neglect, and not knowing how to nourish this wonderful. Like if you look at a tree and you want a tree to produce apples, you're going to support the soil. You're going to do all that stuff. You're going to nourish it, and it will produce nourishing food. And I came from a world where if I feel good, my life is easier. And I came with so much trauma that I was like, and my body hurt all the time. How do I get this so that at least it's easier to live in this? And so my girlfriend's husband dies of cancer. I watch him die. He allowed us person by person by person to go and say goodbye to him as he was preparing to die. And I said to him, his name is Mike, he's a beautiful man, I love him deeply. I said, thank you for loving my girlfriend. And I said to him, thank you for showing me that a man can love a woman, how to love a woman, because I'd never seen it in my whole life. All I'd seen is bullshit. Bullshit. So he dies, and I thanked him for being that teacher. He came from the last door. I never forgot it. And then when my son was ready to take his own life through his own disease, I watched him self-destruct for 5 years. And one day I said, I realized I couldn't keep him in my home anymore because I was enabling him, and I was completely in denial of how sick he was.
Yes.
So I said to him, I've given you everything I could to give you a better life than I ever had. And I said, I've succeeded. And I said, and if you want to destroy your life, I said, have at her. I said, but I'm not taking a front row ticket. And I took the door off of his room so he couldn't stay here and screw women and deal drugs and right. And I said, call me when you're ready to get clean. 6 months later, he phoned sobbing. And I had somebody that is part of the last door, is a friend of mine. His name is Dave. I said, help me, my son's ready. And he says, well, you got to give him this number and I'll put in a good word for him and blah, blah, blah. But he has to show willingness. And I said to my son, Conrad, I said, phone this number. Every morning at 8 o'clock, my son phoned once. And because my son's in a recovery family, being me, they phoned me right away and said, could you bring him tomorrow at lunchtime?
Nice.
And I brought him in.
Yeah.
And it was my original clean date, February 21st. My original clean date was February 21st, 1990. And I went and got him, and he was living in this dilapidated school bus, and he thought he was still like a rock star, porn star, had it going on. And I was like, oh my God, I'm taking pictures so you can see what you thought was cool later. And I brought him there. It was bad. It was really quite sad. I was so scared that he was going to run away, you know, while I was trying to get him on the ferry and that. And I dropped him off and I said, please just stay. He stayed there for 6 months until I kicked him out because he was using protein powder. He was using protein powder and hiding it. And now he's got almost 3 years clean, and I got my son back, and I can never thank them more than supporting it because he was paid for by government subsidy.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, it's like, I don't know if I wanted to continue living if I didn't have that legacy because there's nothing else. The rest of my family are sick. There's nobody. I'm alone. And so that was part of my giving back to the last door. And I've met some really lovely men that make recovery look super sexy, fun. They ride Harleys. I ride a Harley. That's my gift to myself and my little girl. I like intensity. So
what are you riding?
What
are you riding?
CBO Softail Deluxe 214.
I got an old Decker I've had for years.
Right.
Of course I ride, right?
Yeah. But I mean, we need a thrill. And I'm like, this is better than therapy. I freaking turn that thing over. I go down the driveway. I say, God, please let me come home safe and sound. I come home safe and sound. And my need for intensity or chaos is gone. And I'm like, whoa. And that's amends. To me, that's a living amends.
I've never heard it put that way, but you know, it's like my meditation when I'm on the bike. I mean, I have a meditation practice, but when I go out, lots of times I mean, mostly I ride alone because I love that. And I'll be back with my bike next summer. I come to the island. My brother's here and I'm in Campbell River right now.
Nice.
And we'll go for a ride.
Absolutely. I'm waiting for my brand new engine to come because my engine breaks last August. And so on the warranty, I'm getting a brand new engine and it's being shipped in from Milwaukee and I'm just waiting and going, okay, but it's snowing, so it doesn't really matter. But I mean, that was a promise I made to myself. My girlfriend that introduced me to recovery, the woman that died, she was my girlfriend. We were both cooking at Home's Cafe. She introduced me to NA. She died. Her son was born addicted to heroin. Mine was not. I raised my son in the rooms and she died. She died from her disease. I did not. But we used to say to each other, when we get older and have money, we're going to ride Harleys up and down the Malahat. And so I was the one that made it. I would say, Lisa, this one's for you. And I would just pen it, you know, because, and I realized I'm so fortunate. I mean, sometimes I would whine and snivel to a sponsor. Her name is Deborah, who's mothered me, and she mimicked a good relationship, which I was like, what does that look like? You guys are happy. Holy shit. And I just sit there and look and listen, you know, and if I sit long enough, I'll learn, right? But when I would phone her upset about something, she'd go, do you know what you're supposed to be, Germana? And I'm like, what? Dad. I'm like, right. This is a bonus round, right? And all of a sudden I was like, right. This is a gift, even if it's not what I want.
Everything is a gift for us. Everything, you know. I didn't expect to live past, I remember as a kid thinking, I'll never make 18. And
same.
And I remember thinking, okay, so I'll never make 21. I thought 21 for sure I'd never see. And then when I woke up at 25, I did. I woke up at 25. My birthday's in September. And in June of that year, I got married.
Oh, wow.
So I woke up, and in July 1st, 3 weeks later, my daughter came, because the first one can come anytime, right? So I literally woke up at 25, married with a baby girl.
Wow.
And I was like, holy fuck, I guess I'm not going to die. You know,
I better not.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm, you know, there's a job. It really became obvious to me. And then that's also when I woke up to the fact that I had no skills.
Yeah.
I had been living numbed out for years. I didn't, you know, I literally had no skills, and I didn't know what was going on or who I was or anything. I mean, I've been in the business, you know, and that was
your life.
That was my life. And I was riding, of course. I had my bros, you know, which I had to I literally had to let them all go, those bros, and most of them are dead, of course, right? But a couple of them cleaned up, and they're still around, and which is kind of neat, you know, and after all these years. And so good, you know, good for you, and good story about your son. You know, I have 3 kids that I brought up in the rooms, literally, you know, back in the days when we used to smoke, and I bring my kids in, you know, into, there's a group in Calgary called Glenmore, and we, you know, it was down in the basement in a bakery, and there'd be like 60 of us down there, and, you know, 45 people would be smoking, and there was no
feeling our feelings.
Yeah, that's right. It had, you know, you'd leave and your clothes would be just covered in do you remember?
Oh,
and so anyway, they grew up in the rooms, and 2 of them in recovery now, and you know, I'm so grateful. You know, part of my goal back in when I was 25 was to break the chain in my family. You know, I knew that there was the possibility somehow to break the chain of dysfunction, of sickness, of you know, of alcoholism and addiction in my family, and so to have, you know, 2 of my 3 in recovery, and the 3rd guy doesn't seem to need it, you know.
We'll pray for that. If he's been privileged to have to, you know, skip it. Wow, cool.
Yeah, he's very spiritually based. He goes to India to the ashram, and you know, he's talking to me about, Dad, I think you should read. Years ago, I was going through something, and he said, Dad, I think you should read Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth Again.
How lovely.
Yes, and you know, he was like 20, and I said, well, how many times have you read it? He said, well, I've only read it 3 times, but I've listened to it on Audible like 4, so 7, I guess. And I was okay, and so great to have kids that can really support us, right? You know, and
he sounds like he's an old soul, and he came in as a teacher, right? That was part of his teaching.
Yeah. His mom's in Victoria, beautiful gal, and beautiful woman, and you know, I'm married a couple of times, and you know, kind of get that out of my system. So
will you complete me? No. No. Yeah, there is no easier, softer way. Do the work.
Yeah, do the work. So for me now, 10, 11, and 12 service, conscious contact. This is the deal. And it sounds like that's what's happening in your life, is living a service-based life is what else is there?
For me, what's been interesting is I've had moments where I keep thinking, well, Germana, if you get paid or you're really doing service, and I'm like, I still need to be paid. And I don't mind helping women that need help without, mother them. Like one of the ladies that's come around me, I said, I'll be your mom because I know you don't have a mom. Your mom's abandoned you. You don't know how to be a young lady. I'll mother you. I'll take you. Took her for the first pedicure. I did a bunch of things with her she'd never had. And I just like, I'm paying. Let's go. We're going. But what I've struggled with, and I'll own this, I'm not much of a sponsor. I suck at it. I've tried. So I do it in however I do. Like the women that I've brought in that I've sponsored, I've got one sponsee in Germany that's ACA, and she's lovely. But what I find is most people go, I want you to be my sponsor, and then they just want to, forgive me for saying this, take a lot of energy, a lot of time, and not do the work. And I'm coming back to my role with you is to help you do the steps. If you're not doing the steps, then we're not actually doing what the objective is for helping you get better. And Absolutely. So I fire myself, and then people think I'm a bitch, or they think I'm stuck up, and I'm like, you don't understand. I only have so much energy in a day.
Yeah.
80% goes into my job, and I've only got 20% left, and I'm giving you 10, and you're wasting it. Shame on me for continuing this dynamic with you.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that's the job. And I tell sponsees all the time, look, I'm not looking for more friends. And there's a possibility if they stay as my sponsee for 5 or 6 years, we could become friends. But this is not what we're doing here. We're doing the work, and so we stick with it. And lots of guys that are the retreads that I work with.
I've never heard that one.
But, guys at 12, 14 years who go back out and then they find their way back.
Oh, like that.
Lots of times I'll start them at 10, 11, and 12. I say, we're going to do 1 through 9. Yes. But here's where we're going to start. Here's where you never did the work.
Oh.
And the truth is that's where they never did the work. They weren't doing 10 and 11, and they weren't sponsoring, and they weren't. So I start them there because they've already got the basics, and then we'll go back and do the steps. But day one, we're doing step 10.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah. And because how many people do you know that have been in and out? And I mean, they can quote the steps backwards but they haven't been doing them. And 10 and 11 is for me anyway, I'm pretty.
I like it.
Yeah.
And for me, where it shows up is in how you live your life. It's not what comes out of your mouth. It's what do you do when that meeting is over? How are you doing your life?
Yeah.
Versus, I call it lip service, right?
Yeah. I call it meeting sobriety, which it won't hold at 2 a.m. when we wake up in terror, and if we can't, if I don't have the depth, that relationship, if I'm not in the relationship with my higher power, if I'm not God conscious, I'm screwed, because I have a crazy mind that wants to tell me that, that I'm not worthy, wants to tell me that I'm crazy, that people are talking about me, that, all the kind of crazy stuff that my mind can, the mind.
Well, it creates what it does. It also creates that crisis and that chaos that we become addicted to. It's called para-alcoholism. It's like a dry drunk hit.
Yeah.
It's a dry drunk. You don't have to be using, but you can be as nuts with all of this negativity flying around. And then that person, then we start to project. And I think that's how we repeat our childhood trauma again. If things are going too easy, then, oh, life is good. Oh, you paid for bills. Oh, you don't owe this money. Oh, and then all of a sudden, sidebar. Oh, you could have cancer. Have you had that mole check? Yeah. Oh, well, the person that you're sexually interested in is probably screwing your best friend. You should go check out on Facebook. Whatever. It's just all this negativity. It's called the committee of assholes, right?
Yeah, the committee of assholes. Yes, I know them well.
Me
And,
too.
and well, good for you. This is fun. I'm really happy that we are able to do this, and I want to encourage people to find your book. We're going to put a link on this so they can order it, right?
Thank you so much.
And we'll, to your website, to the book, to where you work as a personal trainer. Is that what you're doing mostly, as a personal trainer?
90% of the time I do that, and that's how I pay my bills.
Yeah, my daughter's in Squamish.
Yeah, I have clients in Squamish. I do called satellite training as well. So people will contact me. It's much less expensive, and I set up their diet, and I do some of their programming with FaceTime or Zoom, and then I create their workout program on a website called Elite Trainer, and then just go back and forth, back and forth. I actually hired someone that helped me prepare for 3 shows that use that system, and then I bought access into it. But I like it because a lot of people can't. They don't have the time. They're afraid of COVID. They're blah 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 blah. And you're like, well, let's just do it digitally, and people will do it. And so it helps people be accountable. Like I'm almost finishing one that's called 6 Weeks to Lean, and nobody gets lean in 6 weeks, but they're going to get on track and start to feel empowered, right?
Yes.
And some people, it's all digital, and some people come into the studio as well.
So what about fasting?
I'm not a fan, and I'll tell you why. Because it can set up this bipolar, good, bad, right, wrong, gorging, dieting mindset.
Yes.
And because my first 12-step meeting was Overeaters Anonymous, because I was binge eating. I was about 40 pounds bigger than I am now. And I was eating while I was asleep. So it was really bizarre. And my body just started doing this. I find that when you get into too many extremes around food, it can set up this. For me, what it set up was this Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde thing around food.
Yes.
I would eat and hide the food. That was also linked to my sexual abuse. I had no idea. So I don't advocate. If people are pretty stable, I'm like, have one day where all you have is just green vegetables, a little bit of butter, and some salt, but don't exercise on that day and see how you do. If the next day or if the middle of the night you start binging on peanut butter or cookies or stuff, then that's not good for you, because it's another form of self-harm. It's not love. Remember when you said listening is loving? Listening to your body is loving. And if your body's overreacting, that's not good.
Yes.
So
I do some intermittent fasting. I'm kind of a bulletproof coffee guy in the morning, and I'm a fan of Dave Asprey and his bulletproof coffee. Have you heard of bulletproof coffee?
It's a keto thing, right?
Well, it does, yeah. So my coffee's got butter and turmeric and MCT oil in the morning, and little lion's mane mushroom for the brain.
Yeah.
So yes, I do, but I'm not a faster. But I think that this intermittent fasting has been pretty good for people.
It's actually lovely, and what I find that's difficult for someone like me is if you give me a set of rules, I'll only do them for a while and then I'll absolutely break them. And so I know that about a number of my clients as well. And I'll say to people, like, if you can do 12 hours or 16 hours, do it. And it will help you lean out, no question. Everything has to be sustainable. But when I hear fasting, my brain goes, oh, and those are the people that do the cleanse, the 10-day cleanse. And they've
No, I wasn't thinking that. I think, there was a time in my life when I could do like a 1 day a week.
That's cool.
Yeah. But I've never done more than 4 days, I've just never done more. I was just thinking, do you have a copy of your book there?
Not yet.
Oh.
I've ordered 51 copies. They're being delivered anytime.
Oh, okay.
I will have signed copies for people that want them here. And it's in that video, like that there's a little video, I believe I sent it to you, that it gives a little bit of the preface of what the book content is about, and it's a picture of the book. And it's my girlfriend, who's a graphic designer, she made that cover for me. But like I watched I'm going to go back to fasting and then I'm going to change it on that. But my brother was really big into this fasting thing, and he also has some serious trauma he's never dealt with. And all I saw happen to him when he would get really extreme and then he would binge. So it's the good cop, bad cop with food. And he's got at least 90 pounds more on him than is ideal for him. And he has a love-hate relationship with his body. And I've just seen that happen to a lot of women and some men that get into it. And I just go, whatever works needs to leave you at ease in your own skin and not fearful around food or water or anything. Because I mean, like I said, I was disordered in my eating out the gate, and I didn't understand it.
Yes, nice. Yeah. I'd love to introduce you to my daughter. She's just got her paperwork done as a personal trainer.
Wow, I'd love to speak with her.
You know, and also in recovery and in Squamish, very close to you. And she has a gym that is kind of her sister-in-law's guy. It's his gym. So it's like a family gym and that they all go to. And she's very, I think you guys would click.
I bet.
Yeah, I really do. I'm gonna connect you.
Thank you.
I'm going to connect. So thanks for this. I think we should probably, we're kind of over an hour. I know we could go deeper. I'd love to talk more another time about, about other aspects of recovery. And
I would be honored anytime.
Thank you. And I look forward to meeting you. I'm going to find you in Nanaimo and when I come back with my motorcycle.
Awesome. I will so go for a ride with you.
You think you'll be riding this spring?
I think my bike will be here ready to go in March.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it'll be, I mean, they're still waiting for the engine, right? And I'm like this, I'm like the addict. I'm like, if you don't get me that bike, I'm going to buy another one and I'll just have two bikes. And I don't need two bikes. I just need one.
Yes.
I'm so spoiled. I like my bike. I really do.
There's a lot of Harleys on the island. Old guys come over here and retire.
Yeah.
And they're sitting in garages and sheds. Yeah. There's a lot of Harleys over here. I think that, it's probably a good place to buy an older bike, Well,
I would just buy it waiting for my bike to be ready. And then I would just park it and leave it. I don't know what I would do with it.
Yeah, because older guys don't want to sell their bikes, so they just put them in the garage, right? When they can't, or older men or women, It's funny, when I first started riding, there was hardly any women riding. Yeah. And now Harley's advertising is all about women riding bikes, and I spent quite a bit of time this summer at Kane's, the motorcycle shop in Calgary, and the Harley shop in Calgary, and it was unbelievable how many ladies were coming in and buying bikes, and how many couples were riding together.
I love it. That is the sexiest thing in the world. If you're partnered with a guy that rides and you actually have a nice sexual relationship and you both ride together, it is so hot. I love it. It is hot. Oh, it's freaking awesome. And for me, it's like, I never believed that I would have ever ridden a bike by myself. I always thought I would have the guy, and I waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. And the guys that were hitting on me, I would rather have taken my eyeball out with a pencil and eat it. I was just like, forget it. I am not doing
You're
that.
So bad.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty graphic. And one of the amends I made to myself after I had my really bad car accident, I do have a spinal cord injury, is one of my friends, he's here in town, he rides a bike, he's got lots of sobriety. And one day he said to me, as I was crying in a meeting, he kissed me on the top of the head. He goes, "It's going to be okay." I'm like, and he's like, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Take me for a ride on your bike." And I couldn't have pain. I was on that bike. I'm like, I don't have any pain. Oh my God. And then I promised myself, one of my amends is I was going to buy myself a motorcycle. I bought one, traded it in a Softail Slim. I think 5 months later for CBO Softail Deluxe. I just went, and I'll never look back. I will never, I love my own motorcycle. I like being on the back of a motorcycle too.
So is your bike got bags on it and a windshield?
Clip-offs, yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. It is beautiful. It's a collector's item. It goes at 200K in seconds. Just and of course, because I'm an addict, I'm all over that like a fat kid on a hot dog. I'm like, give it to me. So there's no cops. Is there any cops? Let's go. Yeah, I'm crazy, but that's okay.
I'd get on a hot dog. All right. I love you already. That's amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll send you a copy of this.
Thank you. I will load it up on my YouTube. And I'm learning how to do that because I wanted, my son's he's so digital, I'm not, but I'm learning how to build up my YouTube channel. So I'm wanting to start to do that. So thank you
Yes.
so much.
Yeah, we'll I'll put the link to your channel, all the links, and okay, we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.